Today on Cruiseman's Garage, we're going to show you how to replace those old, tired, boring halogen headlights on your Road Glide with a brand new dual headlamp assembly from Pathfinder LEDs. Now these are going to put out an incredible LED light while minimizing glare, and they're instant on, no warm-up time whatsoever. These Pathfinder LEDs allow you to upgrade to the modern LED look that everybody wants. They'll fit in your stock headlight housing. And it's a simple installation. You can do it yourself with just a couple of tools. There's no extra wires or relays, no bulky harnesses to install. And best of all, you're going to reduce the demand on your power system. So let's get started. The only tools you need for this job are a 1/2 inch socket and a ratchet, a Torx 25, and a couple of flathead screwdrivers. To gain access to the headlights on the Road Glide, we'll need to remove the front fairing. Place a towel on the front fender to protect the paint. On each side of the fairing, there are 3 Torx 25 screws that need to be removed. One is at the top under the windshield, one in the center, and then a lower one down below the glove box. In addition, there are 2 1/2 inch nuts on each side of the inside of the fairing that actually hold the turn signals in place, but they also hold the fairing on too. These will need to be removed as well. Begin by removing the 3 Torx 25 screws on each side of the fairing. There's 6 total. And you may have to move the handlebars from left to right to get them out of the way so that you can gain access to these a little bit easier. And keep these in a parts bowl. Obviously, we'll have to reinstall these later during reassembly. Notice that the bottom Torx screw is longer than the top and the middle one. And now you can use the 1/2 inch ratchet to remove the nuts on the bottom inside of the fairing. Now as you remove these nuts, there's also a washer underneath each nut, and make sure you remove that as well, and keep all of these in a parts bowl. Here's a tip. If you're going to remove the nuts from above rather than below, always put your other hand on the gas tank so that the handle of your ratchet doesn't accidentally hit the tank as you're loosening or tightening the nuts. Again, there's 2 of these on each side of the fairing. You'll need to remove all 4. With the nuts removed, you can now remove the turn signals and just kind of pull them out and let them hang. I like to use a soft rag to keep from scratching the chrome. To remove the fairing, carefully lift up and pull back at the same time, and the fairing will come loose. You can now set the fairing on the towel that we placed on the front fender, and this will give you access to the bulbs. To remove the wires, press in on the 2 tabs on each side of the plug and pull up, and the plug will come loose. Now here you can see the little tabs I'm referring to. You can now set the fairing off to the side, preferably on a soft towel or a soft area so it doesn't get scratched. Personally, I like to use this opportunity to use some water or a damp cloth and clean the inside of the fairing. Get all the dust and dirt and grime off. It's a good idea to do this just to keep everything clean. We need to remove the headlight bezel from the front of the fairing. This is a piece of plastic that surrounds the headlights, and it's held in place by 4 plastic tabs, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom as shown with the circles. Now to remove these, you have to press in and down using a flathead screwdriver. So you press them in toward the center of the headlight, and at the same time put a little downward pressure, and they will pop out. But I'll tell you, it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience to get this done, and then the headlight bezel will come out. The headlamp assembly is held in place with 3 mounting posts. you'll notice some green clips. Now these are pressed in and they will release when pressed in, and then you can lift the fairing off of the headlamp assembly. Now the first time I tried this, I forgot there's a little kind of a rubber cap over the center post, and I had to remove that first before the fairing would come off. But once that was removed, you can then lift the fairing off. With the headlamp assembly removed, I like to go ahead and clean the inside of the fairing where the bezel was previously. Now, I choose to use the mounting hardware that came from the stock headlamp assembly, and the reason is because they're already adjusted from the factory. So I am going to use the new mounting screws that come from Pathfinder LEDs. These are self-tapping screws, and they're a little easier to work with than the factory screws. So I'm going to mount the hardware in the same position as they were on the stock headlamp assembly. After the hardware is installed, let's go ahead and remove the protective plastic covering, set the dual LED headlamp assembly face down, and then place the fairing so that you can fish those wires up through the opening in the fairing. And once you have the wires in place, you can then set the fairing back over those 3 mounting posts in the same fashion that they came off of the stock headlights. It may be necessary to straighten one of the posts using a screwdriver or your fingers just to get it to fit through the opening. And once you do, make sure those clips are clicked into place. That's what holds the headlamp assembly in. Now we can carefully set the fairing back on the front fender with the towel in place, and then we'll connect the wires, or actually the plugs, to the receptacles that come from the motorcycle. Press them in firmly, make sure that those 2 tabs hold them in place, and once you have those wired up, we're ready to reinstall the fairing. You'll notice 2 notches at the top of the headlight unit on the inside of the fairing. Now these will slip down over 2 metal hooks that protrude from the front of the road glide, and you'll do that when you reinstall the fairing. So you line up the fairing and you just kind of set it on those hooks, and then it will hold in place while you're able to reattach all of the screws. Now we're ready to reinstall the turn signals by inserting the bolts through the fairing, and make sure you put the washers on the bolts before you reattach the 1/2-inch nuts. Then using the socket and the ratchet, go ahead and tighten all 4 of these. Remember, there's 2 nuts on each side of the inside of the fairing.